Okay, rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello Pete, or examiner. I'm Adam Jovic, as you know. My student number is 170-70121. I'm doing my professional, legal and ethical studies presentation here called Working with Children on TV and Film Sets. I'm using a basic DSLR setup with two photo fill lights, and I've got my mum here to do the slides for me. So in about 20 seconds time we'll begin. I'll do the 10 minutes. I'll go through all the slides as I'm speaking to them obviously, and then at the end there is a question slide, but obviously I won't be able to ask any questions. So yeah, we'll begin in about 15 seconds. Okay, so my presentation is working with children on TV and film sets. I've got a few different slides here which I'm going to go through, and we'll talk about kind of the ethics of working with kids in film, how we can manage them, how it can be done safely and responsibly for the child. So if you want to go to the first slide. So what needs to be considered? Obviously I've got three little points here which are kind of the key topics we're going to cover for this presentation. To what extent should we be using child actors in the first place? Is it exploitative? So this is more to do with what would be their drive into getting into child acting. Is it their responsibility to be going out and searching for their career, so to speak, at this stage in their life and to earn money? Or is it something they're kind of told to do or pushed in to do by parents or carers? Also, who provides consent? So we'll talk about kind of where consent comes from for child actors, who needs to do the forms, what needs to be signed and where that can be obtained. And how can we assure their personal safety? Probably the most important point, obviously, when working with children. We need to make sure that there's as many safeguarding procedures as possible that protect their safety, so they're not exploited or harassed in any way on sets and in TV studios. So if you want to go to the second slide, please. So these are some of the current industry laws and regulations. So child working license. All parties involved with the production must obtain this for any child under the age of 18. So that applies to the director, anyone working in direct contact with the child will need a child working license. Like I said, it is for any child under the age of 18, so this will have to be signed off for them. It's usually done by a producer or a director role within a film or TV set. DBS checks, again this is for cast and crew in direct contact with the child. They must have background checks done and DBS checks. So this can apply to, say, a makeup artist, a chaperone, can apply to someone who's taken them around on set as a carer or a tutor. Hours and breaks, so no earlier than 7 AM can they start on set, and they can wrap no later than 11. And I believe here for any child from the ages of 5 to 8, they can only be on set for a maximum of 8 hours at a time, and in front of a camera for more than 3 hours at a time. And as for guardians, all child actors under the age of 18 require an on-set chaperone and a tutor. So obviously we need someone to go around with them just to look after them, fulfill their needs, any questions or queries they may have about what they're doing on set, and a tutor to kind of make up for the education aspect of their life as a child, to make sure they're not missing out on schoolwork and etc. So if we want to go on to the next slide, please. Obviously, we have had issues in the past, and it still happens now. We need to ensure that there are regulations that are still coming into place to protect a child's personal safety when working in these workspaces. Obviously, here are some individuals who are notorious for their crimes and their actions within the industry, and this is mostly just through failure of safeguarding systems. So it's either not been noticed or it's not been discussed or reported. So the problem with the individuals of this social status and power within the industry is that they can have a lot of immunity from reports or claims. They can bypass certain regulations because of the power. Maybe some people don't want to report them because of their status in the industry or fear of being a whistleblower. Obviously, official workplace conduct comes first, and we need to make sure that no matter someone's position, their earnings within the job or the industry, that they can't bypass rules. They can't be one-on-one with an individual when they shouldn't be. And a little statistic here is from these victims, and particularly Jimmy Savile, that 82% of victims were female, while 80% were minors. So it's any under the age of 18, the situation being in the UK, which is sourced from the NSPCC there. If let's go on to the next slide, please. Obviously, the BBC. This is someone who, as a major organisation, have changed some of their conduct, and they've released their own official code of conduct, where they prioritise the safety and well-being of the child at all times. This isn't something they had to do, or it's not a law or a legislation that they have to abide to. It's something they've chose to do to help safeguard children in workspaces. A little point here they've mentioned is do not assume sole responsibility for a child. I think this is quite important because obviously this is where wrongdoing can occur, not be seen or reported. We'll get back to that a little bit when I mention my experience. And a little quote here from their page: ultimately, if you have any concerns about the welfare of a child or feel like someone is behaving inappropriately around children, you have the duty to report your concern to a working with children advisor. So this straight away puts the responsibility on the individual. You can't avoid the sense of, oh, someone else will take care of that, or it will get noticed eventually, or I'm too low a position to mention it. No, this puts the responsibility back onto the individual to make sure that they're reporting these concerns or crimes and not letting them go unnoticed. Cool, next slide. So risk assessments, what do we need to consider if we're doing a risk assessment with children? These are a few additional aspects that I've thought of just from my experience. Children are less likely to recognise threats. Obviously, being a child, they're more curious, intrigued by things. They might not recognise something as being electrical or hot or a trip hazard. So we need to make sure these things are more easily recognisable, visually and both audibly recognisable to children, that they are dangerous. This can be done with warning tape. You can put signs up, clear signs with warning signs, just key visual signs for children to recognise dangers and threats. They're more prone to fatigue, discomfort, generally getting tired, agitated on set, so we need to make sure we're accommodating to how they're going to be treated, how they're going to be pushed in terms of their work ethic and how long they're going to be working for. They're often going to be in an unfamiliar environment. Obviously, growing up as a child, very, very few children will be on film sets growing up or will be in TV studios. It's very important to kind of bring back that natural environment to them of either home life through some parents or carers, or education through having a tutor on set. And also, like I said, they're curious and inquisitive, which may expose them to risks. So we need to make sure that anything that could be assumed that wouldn't be a normal hazard to the average crew member might be a hazard to a child. Next slide, please. So this is my case study when I worked on a TV show called The Wedding Fixer, which was run by a company called Little Gem Media. I had a little bit of previous experience with child safeguarding before going into this role. I worked at a summer sort of swim park resort in Willen Lake, where I managed a water park for children mostly of the ages to sort of 10 to 3 to 4. And obviously it was an outdoor water park. It had children in swimsuits and in their underwear effectively. So we had to strongly enforce a no photography policy, a parent must be with them at all times policy, and general sort of safeguarding in the area. So I'd had a little bit of emphasis on that already. Going into the wedding fixer, I was expected a very, very high standard when it comes to interaction with children and how I should be conducting myself. And one of the most important points they made to me was never to be present in a room or a set with a child on my own, which reflects back to the BBC Code of Conduct there. I think that's just to ensure that other people are seeing what's going on with who's behaving around children, how they're behaving around them, and making sure that no one's left to their own devices to potentially do unscrupulous things. And of course, minimal and or no physical contact, so don't try and pick them up, don't try and hold their hand or bring them to a certain place or location. And if a request was made by a child to me on set, I could not deal with this myself. I had to pass it on to an executive producer or a director on set or a supervisor of some kind, just so there was an extra set of eyes dealing with that child. Next slide, please. So how might this affect us as students going out into the working world? Reality TV, so obviously we're going to be working in people's houses, their homes, their personal spaces. They're most likely going to have children in the family, or at least children within the area where we're shooting that scene. Film sets, again, they're going to have child actors. They're either going to be as a cast member, they could be crew, they could be in the gallery spaces, but interaction with child actors is very, very possible working on film sets. Freelance, obviously, if you're working with clients, they might have kids. What might they be wanting to film? Is it for a school or a kid's college or some kind of location to do with kids being the target audience? And permissions and sensitivity, obviously, we need to make sure we're treating children appropriately when we're around them. We need to be professional, use appropriate language with children, and not just assume that everyone's of the same kind of language playing field, that we can address them the same. We will have to address children differently. And so where can we get consent for children? When can we take photographs of them or record them? This is all things that obviously could vary from industry to industry or from client to client, but I think the main sort of ground rules are getting both parents' permission, get that in writing, make sure you've got DBS checks done, and then obviously make sure that consent from the child themselves is as clear as it can be from their age bracket. Cool, next slide please. So what can we do to help rectify these issues? I think the most important one, like I said, is always acquire consent. So both parents, any guardians, carers, crew that work first hand with the child, they need to be checked, have consent forms, and the child working licenses. Adapt your risk assessment, like I said, make those changes to accommodate for what children might be prone to, what they might expose themselves to. Be professional and polite, respectful, like I said, use the appropriate language for working with children, and don't do it alone. Make sure that you're with someone else on the set, bring another crew member in, bring the director in, just make sure you're not taking sole responsibility of a child, not only to protect them, but to potentially protect yourself from any potential lawsuit allegations. I think the most important one is to speak up. If you see anything that's happening on a set, or in an environment where you are filming, you do need to speak up, you do need to report it, and this is the only way that these things are really going to be detected and passed on to any potential law agencies. Cool, that's it. Yeah, next slide please. That's all of the slides I've got, and obviously no questions because there's no audience, but hope you've enjoyed there. That sort of wraps up about 11 minutes, I believe. If we go on to the next slide, you can just see that we've got all the references in here, and the following slide is, if you wouldn't mind, it's just some of the notes that I've put in the notes sections of the slides that I would have been going through. So cool, thank you very much, and I would say hope to see you soon, but this is the end for me, so take care. Cool, do you want to cut the recording?